to the board to speak into the microphones. Apology, we always seem to run a little late when we're in consultation with legal counsel. We need to approve the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Motion by Guy, seconded by Forkert. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion is carried. All right, we have the minutes of two special board meetings. One is the first one, the 22nd of October. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, I'll move the approval of October 22nd special board meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Farber. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. We then have the special board meeting of Wednesday, October 23rd. I'll move the approval of the special board meeting of Wednesday, October 23rd.
Second.
Seconded by Guys. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. And last but not least, we have the minutes of Wednesday, November 6th. It was the first board meeting in November. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'll move their approval as presented.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Forkert. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 I abstain.
All right, one abstention. Motion carried. Okay. Next on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Janet?
I'm trying to make this bigger, but being successful. In the municipal checking account, we began with a balance of $25,442.16. Deposit from our transportation aid and a transfer to checking with some interest brings that account to $11,161.38. The money market account, we began with $25,006.87. Transfer to checking and interest brought that balance to $10,008.56. In the checking account, we began with a balance of $121,961.01. Deposits and transfers, we added back in a stale dated check. FICA, state withholding, and sales tax paid. Payroll and disbursements brought that account to $99,338.53. The Niagara Escarpment Fund at the end of October had $1,251.61. Utility District, $260,164.68. And the North Shore Money Market account began with $515.76. We got 2 cents of interest, bringing that to $515.78. With a balance in all town accounts at the end of October of $382,440.54.
Any questions anybody has? Then I'll move the approval of the treasurer's report as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Guys. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Next is public input. This is the opportunity to address the board on any given subject and also on any agenda item. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And anybody with a general comment, would you please step? You're first in line there, Jim.
So the board's a trip. On item number 2, you did not pledge allegiance to the flag.
That's correct, I'm sorry. Mike?
comment is this morning John Lowry gave me a copy of the Village of Ephraim snow and ice control policy. I read it in detail, it's almost 4 pages. I read it in detail over lunch, and I'm just letting the board know that what I intend on doing with this is I'm gonna correct it to read Town of Liberty Grove rather than Village of Ephraim. Some other things, the Village of Ephraim as a contractor doing its road work, whereas of course we have in-house doing that. Administrator is called her, and of course our administrator is a his, and so on. And I'm gonna correct it and forward it to my committee. Our committee is meeting, rather than first Monday in December or 2 December, we're meeting on 9 December because I'm gonna be out of town for the first meeting, so they decided that they'd put it back a week so we could all be together. By that meeting, probably before the end of this week, or certainly before the beginning of next week, I will forward to my committee members a copy of this as corrected or revised to account for Town of Liberty Grove. And it is my intention to discuss it and pass whatever we agree upon at the meeting on 9 December, which I will be forwarding it to your board after that. It's a very, very much like the tone of it. It has a equal responsibility where the town, or in this case, in their case, the village, has certain responsibilities, and the property owner has certain responsibilities. And I think that that's one thing, especially considering the special meeting Monday night, where we're called upon to tighten our belts a little bit for budget reasons, that I think that we need to account for that, especially in this policy of snow plowing and the like for our highway committee. So that's why I'm taking this bull by the horns and trying to get back to the board with a policy that I think will be reasonable and righteous. As I said at the Monday night meeting, I think we're very fortunate to have Jay and the fellows as town employees. I think they do a wonderful job. Bud and I went out and looked at the last, we've spent 3 days doing road inspections to grade and rate the roads for their condition. Kim Shumway and Bud and I went on the first time, Mike Barkey and Bud and I went on the second time, and today time's running a little short. I don't know, we wanted to look at the roads before the snow flies, so obviously, it doesn't do a lot of good to look at in snow cover. So I just want to give you a heads up that that's what's in the works.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else with a general comment?
Hi, Susan Watson
from Gills Rock. My comment is about the reasonable request that we would be maybe attending finance meetings or reading about the finance meetings so that we'd be more aware of what was taking place on this board. So in that light, I went online to try to find any of the minutes from any of the finance meetings or any of the agendas from any of the finance meetings. And as of the day of the meeting, there was only 1 minute from the entire year of a finance committee meeting, and there was only 4 agendas. And the agendas are basically very brief, just, we're going to be meeting or whatever. Now today you've given us copies of the draft that you just approved of the minutes, which by the way on the calendar we call finance committee meetings. Here you're calling them special board meetings. So because of that, I think people probably didn't realize they were as important as they were, because on the calendar they are called finance meetings, finance committee meetings. So you have these here, but they were not available to read ever. And I noticed about them when I did read them, when Frank Forkert brought them to me from the town hall that day, that there was absolutely no comment from anybody. So even Mike Mercier, who might have been involved or said anything, there was no comment on them. So they're not very complete from that point of view either. There's very little information here. So if you're looking at minutes to try to learn anything, you wouldn't learn much from these minutes. And I would just suggest that you call them what you're going to call them, finance committee meetings, or special board meetings, I should call them here, so that we know what you're talking about. And then get them up on the website in time next time.
Thank you. Your general comment?
Good evening, everyone. Today I took a few moments and called Holly Hanson down in the courthouse.
Sorry, name?
Oh, I'm sorry, True Mulligan, and
We knew that, but for the record.
9855 North Pier Road. I called Holly, she's does real property down in Sturge. And I asked her what some of the other levies were for some of the other towns within Door County, and I'm not gonna suggest we're anywhere near it, but the Clay Banks hits the low end at $70,988 for their annual levy. I did take the time, and I asked for Washington Islands, Bailey's Harbor, and Gibraltar, our neighbors, and I took the three of those and averaged them. And their average levy for those three townships is $1.23 million annually. That was last year's, incidentally. This year's numbers are not available. And if you consider what Liberty Grove is suggesting, it's about 30% more. And I don't know if we get 30% more problems in Liberty Grove, or what it is, but it's certainly a large amount of money for levying. And I hope that, to use Mike Walker's words, we need to tighten our belts. I mean, that's how I feel about it. And just quickly going over the agenda for tonight, 7C is talking about replacing the light bulbs in the shop. Well, the LED lights are great, but I think you probably live without them for another year. Talk about buying a mini excavator. I don't know if that was a 37.5 in the budget that was proposed. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe we can go another year without spending the 37.5. But in closing, I'd like to go back to what I said earlier today. I think that the Liberty Grove would be not serving itself well if they didn't tackle the highways. And there was a budget item towards the end of your proposed budget. It was on page 4, line item 153, where it says miscellaneous, $200,000. I would suggest or hope that you would take a good portion of that and put it towards the highways. And I would hope that you would get the electric to come back and approve the spending on the highways, because it just follows to continue to go on. Thanks.
Thank you.
That 200, by the way, was the override, so that's out of there automatically.
Why didn't you say?
Anybody else in general comments?
John Stokes back in North River Drive. These probably aren't the latest and greatest versions of these sheets. I pulled off the internet proposed budget sheets, a couple of them, and I've got a real objection to putting an item in there that's $200,000 and says miscellaneous. That doesn't provide any information for us. I think that's an absurdity, it's ridiculous. To me, it smells like you're trying to hide something. But obviously, if you look at the $200,000 you were asking for, and the $200,000 that's here, if you take them both out, you've got a balanced budget. That means that everything you've got in here, you've got your anticipated receipts equaling your anticipated spending. So I don't see where you need to cut anything from what you currently got in here and all the other lines.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, a general comment? All right, anybody wishing to speak on number 7? Anybody wishing to speak on number 8?
I'm number 7.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Henry. Anybody else on 7? Number 8. Bob? Susan? Anybody else on 8? John? Anybody else? All right, going on. Anybody on 9? Susan? Yeah. Yeah, Jay. Anybody else on 9? Number 10. John? Susan? And yes, your name, sir.
James, yeah.
James?
Who was the first one?
John. Sorry. Anybody on 11? Mike? Anybody on course, oh, Susan, 11? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Anybody on 12? Okay, and I think that's probably completed. All right, then let's go to number 7, consider approval of agreements. The first one is servicing the hall and fire station, heating, venting, and air conditioning. You've got copies of that proposal. And we're looking at two separate ones. One is for the Liberty Grove Fire Station in Ellison Bay. And current labor rates under a maintenance agreement are a service charge of $60 regular time, and $90 overtime. The labor rate is $80 regular time, $120 overtime. The labor coverage is 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Do you want to make a comment to this, Bud, at all?
Just that the contract for the station would be $1,200 for the annual service agreement.
Okay. Henry, I've got you down on 7. I didn't break out whether it was A, B, or C.
So far.
So far, you're good. Okay. All right. Any questions from the board? I think we'll vote separately on both contracts. So we're looking at a contract for $1,200 a year. I'll make a motion to approve that contract with DeMolin, HVAC LLC. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Forker. Discussion, please. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the second is for the town office and highway department. The service charges are the same, $60 regular time, $90 overtime. The labor rate, $80 regular time, $120 overtime. And the total on this, Bud, is
$21.65.
$21.65. Okay, all right, back to the board.
I move we accept proposal.
For the,
Town office and highway department for $21.65.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Farber, seconded by Cavazos. Discussion, please. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Going on to 7B, we have a recycling proposal from Going Garbage that would run from January 2014 through December 2016. Is that correct? 2 years? That should be a 1 year, right? It's a 2 year. Got it. Okay. Okay. Any comments? I'm sorry?
It's 3 years.
It's 3 years, 14, 15, and 16. Basically, what they do is charge, the town of Liberty Grove would be charged per pound for material collected at the site at the rate of approximately 4 cents per pound. This is the recycling services fee only, does not include tipping fees, et cetera, et cetera. The paper market rebate shall be $45 less per ton than the official Chicago board market. A fuel surcharge of $10 per gallon for fuel costs above $3.75, or 10 cents, I'm sorry, above $3.75. The total, well, we don't really have a total for that, do we?
It's an identical contract to what we had for the last
Correct.
3 years.
And that amount could cost the town how much per year?
About $26,000 a year.
Okay.
I guess my question was, how does number 7 relate to the mentioned number 8? And I think we also got like there's a rebate that comes back from going garbage,
Is that correct?
Comes back from the county,
From the county?
from somebody.
Right.
and that's determined year by year whether you'll even get it or not, because it actually comes from the state. And then the state sends it to the county allocates it. If the state cuts it off, there won't be.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board then. I'm going to make a motion to table this contract pending our discussion on number 8. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Lowry, seconded by Cavazos. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, number 7C. This is from US Lamp. This is for LED lamps. Why do you want to explain this a little bit? You work with these people.
This is basically a proposal to replace 7 wall packs on the town hall at shop, mainly the shop portion. The cost is there of $27.90 with 2 grants, one from Focus on Energy, one from US Lamp. The total cost would be $22.8005. Working through the kilowatt hours saved and the cost per kilowatt hour, there would be annual savings in electricity of $551.88 with a payback in 4.13 years. And the return on investment 24.2%. So after the initial payback, the lights would be at the reduced rate would they pay themselves off in the 4.13 years. I talked to the representative yesterday. They said that these were ordered by the end of the month. The rebates would be in effect, but they'll expire after that. So that is, and as far as the money, this would be a expenditure from this year. This would come out of the, we can move some money out of the quarry expenses, which are coming in light this year, and we could pay for it out of that.
Henry, so if you tell me so.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, back to the board.
But is it not only that it's cheaper, but it also actually is greener, so to speak?
This is the green incentive pushed by Focus on Energy in cooperation with US Lamp and WPS.
Let's see,
I assume
think-
if electric rates go up, it will even be quicker than 4.13 years.
Yeah, that's based on a kilowatt hour price in here of 0.12 cents apparently.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed project proposal by moving money from the quarry budget to cover this to the expense of $2,280.05. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Forker. Further discussion, please.
I think it's commendable enough by the town office to think in those terms as well. I think that's thinking outside the box.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Going on to number 8, review the results of the 11-18 budget hearing and town meeting. Consider action if appropriate in areas of recycling, highways, donations, fire truck purchase, utilities, committee per diems, and frequency of meetings. Bob?
Bob Tidball, 12376 Timberline Road. I want to review what we did Monday night very briefly to make sure I'm on the same page as what has happened. And if I am wrong about something, tell me immediately. All right. First thing we did was we did not increase the cap. So the budget then was $2,361,085. I think.
The budget?
The approved budget, the cap, expenses.
Well, except the levy is 1,578,000.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line on the levy.
Okay,
The next
but
question.
with that levy, you're still gonna spend over $2 million. Am I wrong?
If the total expenses are that number, yes, I don't have that right here.
That's
Okay. All right, we're still gonna, so we're gonna spend $2,000,003 roughly.
Correct.
We then approved the budget less the increase in the cap. And then we discussed and did not approve, how do I say this? The money, there's a cap on highway spending imposed by the state, and there was a motion to exceed that, and that was defeated by one vote.
The state, okay, the question, excuse me, on the expenditures on highways, if you spend more than $5,000 per mile
Right,
on all your highways,
right,
that proposed budget must be approved.
that's, yeah. But we were over that.
We were over that. So
And
again,
by approximately, I think it's the number is around 300,000.
correct, it was
Okay.
852.
Okay. But that then means that, you now have $300,000 you have to spend, or you can spend elsewhere.
That is correct.
All right. We all have pet projects. One of mine is the harbor, Ellison Bay Harbor. There are major problems there. The budget for next year is $11,500. That doesn't even meet the bid you got from Action Electric to fix the electrical system. And if you go down there and you look at the piers, they're not level anymore. I mean, there is some very serious problems down there. So my suggestion to the board is that this money that you now have to find a home for, I think you need to put on a contingency fund, but which we've never done really, because you're gonna have some surprises, and that's gonna be one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Susan?
Actually, I'd like to hear what you guys are gonna say about this too, so maybe I should wait to speak. I'd like to hear what you're going to talk about on this topic. You are going to be talking about it, right?
Right, but why don't you go ahead and we'll,
I don't know what I want to.
oh,
That's for sure. Well, one thing I just heard that I didn't realize was, okay, so because we didn't approve the highway budget, you're saying that gave you a bunch of, like a huge slush fund that you can use for something else?
the levy was approved,
Right.
and that was the 1,514,000.
We thought that was the normal budget. Was that
is
about
the
right?
normal
Okay,
budget. Right,
okay, but then we didn't approve the highway
correct,
budget, then all of a sudden, that money was still in the budget and can now be used for anything
correct.
except the highway.
Well, our understanding on that is it's up to 500.
505.
It's 500,
505,000.
I thought it's 550,000 if you have 105 miles of roads.
That's 525.
525? Is
So-
it just 525 then?
So we
505?
have basically available 505,000 to spend on highways.
Right. Okay, so I guess the question I had for you was, why do we generally spend, I thought it was 525, so why do we generally spend 60% more than other, parts of Wisconsin on 1 mile of road?
Well, it probably goes back to the fact that the roads have not been kept up over the years. So we're basically in a catch-up game, and because of the rolling 5-year plans that have been put in, we're now beginning to realize what we're looking at 5 years, up to 5 years out, and obviously that switches.
Okay.
But that revealed the fact that we're probably facing anywhere from $500,000 to $800,000 a year on roads, repair, resurfacing, and so forth.
Okay. The other thing I think that would have really helped us on this is, as Bud knows, because he's the one that sent me an email when Janet was out that day, on the day of the meeting, I was still having trouble getting the number for that we were going to all be voting on that night for that highway number, because nobody had that number, and Janet had tried a couple times to get it for me, but until we figured out that you had to subtract this, that, and the other thing, we had no number to look at. And it would have been a really good idea to have that agenda from that meeting ahead of time somewhere, so we could look at those 3 points that we'd be voting on, because as you know, nobody knew we were gonna be voting on 3 things when they came here.
Okay, thank you. John?
I was also hoping I could comment after you made your, or had your discussion. But I commend Bob for a great catch here. $300,000 slush fund, and you guys kept the stone face after all that. That's pretty good. To me, that just seems to make sense that the only thing that matters here is the road thing. Okay, you want that 300 for the road. Now you can spend it all over the place, anywhere you want, and still spend $500,000 plus on roads. And it's my feeling that that will probably get us through 2014 with that amount of spending on roads, and then all the surplus for all this other good stuff, besides what we've already got in the budget.
I think that needs clarification. I don't think we've made a decision at this point in time. At least, I haven't been involved in the decision to that point.
Your big what decision?
We have not made a decision on the road for what we're gonna spend.
You've got
We-
a budgeted amount.
We can spend that amount, but we have not made that decision.
Okay.
Okay, back to the board. Let's just go through this one item at a time, and we're not going to necessarily make a decision now, because we're going to have obviously some board finance meetings coming up to really address this. But I think we need to look at the options that are available to us, so the public understands what we're looking at. And hopefully they will come to those meetings and express, their input as well. And I'm going to suggest that people with the town budget, that they want things cut, they come line by line. Tell us which item you want cut and why. Okay, comments here. Let's go first on the areas of recycling. I guess I'll throw my 2 cents out to start this. $21,000 a year. I don't think it serves everybody in the town. And I think that's, although everybody in the town is paying for it, I think that's one item that we need to take under consideration. Thoughts?
The whole proposal that I understood for the town-wide garbage collection was a response to demand, obviously not tremendous demand, but a lot of demand to have town-wide garbage collection on the basis of the fact that the more people who are participating, the lower the unit cost would be. Going into it with that idea, the board in the finance committee level had discussed, well, if that's the case and we have town-wide recycling and garbage pickup, it would be a single stream as we had been proposed, so that you would mix your paper and glass recyclables as well as your trash. That not only would it bring down existing costs and provide service for the entire town, but it would also help to cut some of the expenses, such as the amount, the $26,000 you had guessed at, Jen, the $26,000 a year that's now being paid. So it was yet another effort on the part of the town to not only increase services, but also to decrease expenses. That's how I understood it. Did everybody get it the way I got it?
Yeah,
That's correct.
It's the balance that's hard to figure, and hard to present. And I don't think the card system that was used to notify the electorate had enough details in it. There should have been an accompanying letter or something that gave people enough information to make a decision. And I think at this point, to go back again is going to be difficult. And I agree with our original purposes, but from the results, and I don't know, Janet, if you have those at the top of your mind, of the cards we sent out, how many came back, and how many said yes, and how many said no.
I don't have exact numbers right in front of me, I can certainly go get them. We sent out about 1,891 cards. And we've gotten back approximately 450 of them.
406 were returned as of November 6th, 22.5%. 94 wanting 1 year, 37 wanting 6 months, and 275 wanting no service at all.
And more cards this one
Okay, but back to my comment on the recycling is, and the unfortunate part is that if the decision is to not keep funding that, it impacts one of our businesses in the town.
It also shuts down a $6,000 a year revenue stream.
Yeah. But I think these are gonna be some very hard decisions that we're gonna be faced with.
Maybe one of the criteria we need to start with, then, John, is like you brought up, what proportion of the town does a particular service benefit? And maybe the more widespread benefit, in numbers, I guess, the way you decide how you're going to tighten it up.
Okay.
It also means that there's going to be an awful lot of glass and paper that's going to go into a landfill site.
Well, and in this case, going garbage will be held responsible to make sure that doesn't happen by the state. And obviously, we'll have to be, if you will, patrolling our residents to make sure they're not putting recyclables in with the garbage. It's a multifaceted situation.
Well, let me just ask this, what would be the alternative? You know, people who take the recycling for granted now, if you will, and just, weekly, monthly, or whatever, haul all of their cans and glass and paper to going garbage and throw them in the bins labeled Liberty Grove, what would they then have to do to deal with their recycling?
Individually pay for it.
Purchase a recycling container that'll be put next to the garbage can. So the residents will have to pick up the cost out of pocket.
So then it really wouldn't be stopping a revenue stream necessarily for Liberty Grove business. The revenue would just come from multiple sources instead of one.
Okay, going on to the next one.
Wait, can I ask?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, let's talk about the services we all benefit from here in Liberty
Well,
Grove.
let's keep it right to what
Yeah,
the
this is the
discussion
point.
was.
Okay, the question is, do we have a service besides recycling that we get, besides snow plowing and recycling? I'm trying to think what services we do get. So I know you said you'd be cutting back services. This looks like about the only thing you can cut. I mean, are you cutting it because it's a
Well,
service?
we
all this?
have a $350,000 fire truck coming up.
Is that in the budget?
No,
Okay, why isn't it? You mean this year?
it's the fire board has asked for it. We have not put it in the budget at this point in time. It actually has been put off for the last 3 years.
Yes.
So it's not in this budget?
It's not in this
And
budget.
it won't be, right? Because we just approved this?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
But you asked what other services we did provide.
Yeah, what other services do you provide?
Well, obviously the snow plowing,
Yes, that one?
the mowing of the roadways.
I mean the ones we want.
The ones you want?
The things that we think are services.
Snow plowing is not a service.
No, I said snow plowing right away.
Oh,
I
okay,
agree, to
I'm
me,
sorry.
that's the most important service that you provide.
The
And then
digging
recycling.
of the graves, the mowing of the cemeteries, what am I missing?
Maintenance of the parks.
Maintenance of the parks.
I assume, do you not charge for grave digging?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I'm saying recycling is one of the free things we get,
Okay.
along with snow plowing. I'm just saying, are those the only two things?
Emergency services.
Emergency service. Our road crew too, Susie, gets out there when trees fall down on the road. Somebody
Yes,
calls
I
in,
agree.
They're picked up.
We're not a service-heavy town, is all I'm saying. We're
Well,
not a
we
service-heavy
don't,
town.
not compared to a village or a city, that's
Someone that has
correct.
utilities or sewer or water, yes.
Well, we do have, yeah,
A few people, yes, your sister
We have the
did.
utility district.
okay. Going on to highways. You want me to start the discussion? I'll be more than happy. I think we go below the 5,000.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think it would be a good idea, you know, try and go above it again. The vote's been taken. However, I have to agree with what you said earlier, John, and what Mr. Milliken has said twice now. This is all we got in this catch-up situation. Highways, because we have so many miles of road, are something that is a major part of our budget. Highways are also a major part of just about every single municipality's budget. They're expensive. And in the past, whenever we have been in a tight situation in the budget, we've pushed off a highway or two because it's a quick way to save a whole bunch of money. Well, this road needs to be repaired this year, it's $200,000, we'll push that off a year. And we've done that for year after year after year for the 6 years I've been on the budget. And now we've come to a place where we are very far behind, and that's why, as John explained earlier, the highway budget is larger. We're trying to catch up so we don't get even farther behind. But as far as this year goes, I think dropping it below the threshold that the state has for public approval is the best we can do. So that's basically all we can do, is the best we can do with what we have for this year.
And I know that, heaven knows that the subject of highways has been a very divisive one, causing no end of contention among the town. But up until September of this year, as in after the vote on Garrett Bay Road had been made, I don't think I heard ever anybody, whether it was Isleview Road or Garrett Bay Road, suggest that the road didn't need to be repaired or resurfaced or whatever you want to call it. There was lots of contention about how wide the clear zone could be, how wide the road would be and so forth, what the speed limits would be and so forth and so on for years. But never up until September did I ever hear anybody say, well, the road doesn't even need to be repaired. And so we're losing sight now in all of this contention, I think, about what's necessary as opposed to how it would be done. And unless we get back on track and think about what's necessary, and only postpone problems down the road, no pun intended, because it's not as immediate because of all this contention, then we're not doing a service to the town by just avoiding the subject altogether and saying we don't need any road repairs at all. Unless I'm wrong about this, I have not heard that up until September of this year.
Go ahead, Larry. I think Lou and Nancy have set forth the basic facts. This is my fifth budget, and I was on Highway Committee for 4 years. I think that we have to do all we can on our highways. If we don't, we're going to be giving a problem to our children and other people, because the roads are gonna be so bad, and the costs are gonna be so much higher in future years, that we'll be in a bad situation. We're not the only municipality that hasn't stayed up to date. If you drive through Sister Bay, if you drive through Ephraim, you see roads that are not in good condition, and those roads are not safe. It's hard on the vehicles when we use them, and they're not very comfortable. I think we have to do all we can within the limits of votes on Monday night to get the most mileage of up to $505,000 in this next year.
I will suggest that when we get to that decision, that we have one road that is now basically prepped, and then that road needs to be paved. I don't think we have to pave the entire distance. There are pretty decent sections from, I'm talking about Garrett Bay, obviously, pretty decent sections from 42 to Birch, and then there's a tough section inside, right in front of these Alfords. But then, until you get to, what is it, Maplewood there, it's pretty decent shape. So if we just took the worst sections and paved those, I think that would complete the project.
Is that sewer project on Cedar Shore Road also part of this highway budget?
Yeah, and I think that may have to go by the wayside for a year.
It's pretty much an unknown until our engineering report comes in.
Any other comments, highway? Okay,
And the 5-year rolling plan will be put on hold?
no, I think it has to still be there. Obviously, there's gonna be some very obvious adjustments to that.
So we'll take it road by road.
We take it road by road, and I would think, in all honesty, I would think that the board next year probably is gonna ask for levy override. We're not solving our problems by not doing it. So,
And I think everybody should understood by not having that levy override of $200,000 or our 2015 budget and levy cap is gonna be down. We're gonna be in serious trouble in 2015. And the board is thinking ahead, and that's why we added the $200,000, so that we would at least stay level with our levy limits.
okay, donations. Oh boy. We've been asked from the room tax that the town gets, which is approximately, what, 50, it goes from year to year a little bit, but approximately 58,000. Currently by statute, the town basically can put that money into the general, general fund and spend it as it wishes. As I pointed out at a couple meetings, we basically have put that money aside and given donations to a number of the organizations within the town. I don't know, 48,000 against the $400,000 cut we're trying to make. And we don't obviously have to make those cuts in 1 year, and I guess my suggestion at this point in time, we ease into this. I would not like to see us at for the 2015 budget, suddenly have to come up with $400,000 big on the budget. So I guess what I'm suggesting here is that as we go through this process, we pick those things we feel that this year we can probably cut back on, and then next year take another step. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that we cut back on the 48 this year.
Well, one of the things that I've been thinking of over the last couple of days has been, we've had the caps for years now, for several years, 0%. And yet, we have, over the last few years, added some things. And a few things, some of them were donations. Some of them were to pay all our committee members, and I'm not saying those are bad decisions. But it seems that as the caps persist, we should look at the things that we added most recently with a critical eye, because we have been capped, and as we pay off our debt, that levy even goes down more. It seems prudent to me to look at some of the things that we have added, no matter how small, because it was an added expense during a 0% cap. And one other thing that I would like to say about the caps, we heard on the 18th, repeated variation on a theme, I have to live within my budget. The board will have to do the same. And I understand that, but I also challenge the people who were holding that tenet so dear to their heart. Have you had a state-imposed cap on your budget? As milk prices went up 50 cents a gallon, did you cut back on milk, or did you just cough it up? Was it a really, truly a budget that was capped like ours is with an iron fist? Or as gas prices from 2005 to now went to what they are, did you all stop driving accordingly as much? I mean, everybody cut back, but we're capped. We're capped here. So I just ask you to, walk in our shoes a little bit and think about that.
We're asking the same. Yeah, I mean, how are you different than us?
I'm Ken.
Frank?
There's been a feeling in the North Business Group that all of the $58,000 should go to them to spend for developing tourism because it's based upon tax receipts. The statutes and the setting up of the organization that collects that tax has no requirements on the towns to spend it for that. The town can just take that money in and do it. There is a feeling amongst the business people that this should be, because there is discussion going on about a state law that would require the monies that come into the municipalities to do that, but that has not been passed. And when you think about our $58,000 and the $20,000 we gave to Dornorth and the parks we maintain, the neat roads, we pick up the trash along the roads, we keep this town looking nice as a tourist destination. So I think we spend an awful lot more than $58,000 on the things that are basic for the tourists. That's just to clarify that one issue.
Anybody else? Onward? Fire truck purchase.
But John, I
Yes.
have one question with that. The line item economic development that went up $4,000 in this year's upcoming budget, was that supposedly the money from the room tax that would be given out to things? Okay.
Fire truck. Yeah, I think I'd like to rename this. It sounds just like a purchase. This is actually a proposal to reduce the size of the fire truck fleet from three, take 3 trucks and substitute the 1 new truck for that. This is not a lot of big boys who want to play with their red trucks and have a big new toy. From what I understand now, after being on the fire board for a while, I understand exactly why this is necessary, and I would make a very strong pitch for it sooner than later. It has been on the back burner now for 3 years. In those 3 years, not to mention before that, the very biggest part of the fire department budget proportionately actually goes toward maintenance of the existing fleet. The older the fleet gets, the more expenses are put forth. the new truck would obviously need maintenance, but not to the extent that 3 old trucks need maintenance now. 1 new truck would need less maintenance. In addition to that, as a money-saving opportunity, there's a human resource opportunity to save. Right now, in order to conduct the firefighting that they need to do, they have to send out the minimum of 2 trucks. One is a pumper and one is the a fire engine. I don't know what, the tanker. Thank you, Nancy. So they have to send out 2 trucks. That needs at least 2 drivers as opposed to 1 driver for this new truck, which would have the capacity that 2 tankers would have, so that the efficiency at a fire would be greater and the human resource necessary to get that resource to the fire would be reduced at the same time. And so, whereas it says, oh, new fire truck purchase, it's another new toy, it's actually a way of reducing expenses on a yearly basis and enhancing the efficiency that the fire department would have as a result of that. Did I leave something out about that?
Well, I don't think you left anything out, Lou, but I would reiterate that a major problem that's been demonstrated by the Sister Bay and Liberty Grove Fire Department, which is one of the largest ones, if not the largest, is an ever-shrinking pool of volunteers. And as they're down to like a core bunch of people that always show up when there's a fire call, and the rest are kind of hit and miss. And they have run into situations where they don't have enough people to take out the trucks that they need to get to a fire. And that's a problem, because the volunteerism, they even had a volunteer HR person come in to try and pump up the volunteer roster, if you will, and get more people to sign up. And for a number of reasons, very busy lives, very busy families, the training requirements required by NFP, ever-changing and increasing. For a lot of reasons altogether, their volunteers are shrinking. And they, in order to keep the caliber of firefighting ability, which is a service that we all enjoy and have as a safety net in Liberty Grove and Sister Bay, in order to keep that at a level where it means something, they either have to have more volunteers, which they've tried to do, or they have to have a more efficient fleet that can be handled by fewer people. And I guess that's what I wanted to reiterate.
State statutes have recommended for a town and village of the size of Liberty Grove, Sister Bay, that there be a minimum of 150 eligible volunteers servicing that area. We have fewer than 70. There is absolutely no guaranteed response to any emergency in this town. There is no guarantee at all that a fire truck or an ambulance will come. It's all up to the volunteers. Right?
I'd just like to add that the total cost of the tanker we're talking about is $375,000. We have $250,000 that we have to borrow to pay our share. Sister Bay has an accounting system where they've been accumulating money over the last few years for this. All they need to do is write a check. This is where this town has been behind the 8 ball for the 43 years I've been here. We don't have contingency funds. We don't budget ahead.
We do now. We started last year.
We're beginning, just beginning, but we're not to the degree that we should, we need to. And this is part of the problem we face now. This is why we have to go out and borrow $250,000. Thank you.
One question, what is the line item for the fire department pay on this? Anyone know?
Public,
What number is it on here?
he's looking that up, I have to, while he's looking that up, I have to tell a story.
Public safety, page 1.
I don't know how many people here remember a gentleman by the name of Eddie Valentine.
Oh,
Sure.
Eddie was on the Eaton Volunteer Fire Department. When I first got on the Eaton Volunteer Fire Department, there were no rules, no regulations. Training was by the seat of your pants. And anybody who's gone through that fire station, that old pumper, the old antique in there, that was one of 3 vehicles in that station. The day that Curly Randall's house caught fire in Fish Creek, the siren went off. In those days, you didn't have pagers or anything. The siren went off, and you hoped everybody heard it. I get to the fire station. Eddie is there. He says, "Come on, jump in." So he starts this old pumper. Off we go in this thing, I mean, rattle trap down the road. Eddie forgot to put the choke in. We got about as far as Alexander's, and guess what? Chomp, chomp, chomp. They had to send another truck back out to pull us into the fire. So, anyway, did you find it on the line item?
No,
First page.
where is the butter? What line?
Public safety,
Within that number you're saying, within the 246,000?
40 to 45.
40 to 45.
Which one?
On
40?
the bottom of page 1.
Okay, but which one is what you pay the volunteers? Where's that pay? It's $20 an hour, is it not?
comes out of the 221, 366, further up there.
Okay, that's in the fire board levy, so that's actually paid in that levy, within that number?
Yeah.
Okay, is that also fire chief, for instance?
Yes.
Because that'd be nice if that was broken out, so you can see that some employee.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? If you get rid of 3 fire trucks and end up with 1, how do you treat 2 fires? With multiple engines, I would think that you had, in the space we had in the township, if you had more than 1 fire, you would be in dire circumstances if you didn't have a truck to go there.
Mutual aid.
Well, no, one is a tanker that actually carries the water
Yes,
to
I
the fire,
understand.
and the other one is the engine.
I thought it was said they were going to get rid of 3 trucks and buy 1 new one.
That's correct.
Well, if one's a pumper, one's
A tanker.
a tanker, what's the third one?
It's 2 tankers.
It's 2 tankers are going.
The new truck would actually have the capacity that the 2 tankers would have. It's bigger. So instead of having to send 2 tankers
And a pumper.
and a pumper, it would send, it would
One
all be
pumper
in one.
tanker.
Yeah, it would be a pumper tanker in one.
Would that fit down our roads?
We always strive for that when we're on the fire board, when we're looking at trucks. But what we have found very often to be the case is that the little ones that get down the roads are much more expensive. And so we, here we are again, balancing the expense. When the last time we looked at a small truck, it was well over $1 million, and that was about 4 years ago, I think. Maybe, it was the last truck that we bought, that we looked at, and it was not a small one, because the small one was so much more expensive.
Maybe we should keep our small ones then.
Am I correct that, I think Chief had said that we are keeping trucks basically for 25 years,
That's yeah.
and that 20 years is about the recommended life.
And then they start to just kill us with maintenance.
Well, the maintenance, like I had mentioned, but also the fact that the standards that the state imposes
Right.
are not at the level that the truck would be. It's not necessarily just a local decision, unfortunately.
Right.
And Eddie and I would have never been on the.
No.
Can I ask one more question, please?
Go ahead.
With the lack of volunteers, what efforts are being made to generate more volunteers for services? I know, and I can tell a story, at my house, someone reported there was a fire at a house. And we had a fire going, but it was a bonfire, had the hose out ready to put it out, but we had a permit. And the fire truck showed up at this thing, and they said, do you have a permit for the fire? Yes. And they said, you have water source available? I said, yes, right here. And they showed up with a truck and several private vehicles, and might have been a number of people inquired. I say, they were very prompt, very experienced, and very professional acting. I was very pleased. I thought, if I ever do have a fire, it looks good to me. But I'm wondering, I'm pretty old for being a volunteer fireman, and probably wouldn't fit within the state standards. So I wonder what efforts are being made to increase, I mean, because a lot of young guys, these fellows that were there, were fellows that worked around in the area, and when the fire they called, they left work and came out, and none of them were pretty angry that they were called. They thought it was kind of maybe a lark, but to some extent. But I'm just wondering what.
Nancy mentioned the efforts that the Human Resource Department that was brought in last year to be able to beef up volunteerism. John mentioned the fact that the towns have a mutual aid agreement. Since June of 2012, we've been involved with the towns of Egg Harbor, the village of Egg Harbor, Gibraltar, Ephraim, somewhat Bailey's Harbor, on the and Sister Bay, of course, on the creation of a joint fire district that would be basically Northern Door, the towns and villages I just mentioned. That would allow us to draw on a regular basis from the numbers of people. The village of Egg Harbor, for example, does not have one volunteer firefighter in its boundary, not one. The village of Egg Harbor is in a joint venture, so to speak, with the town of Egg Harbor, where all of its volunteers are drawn. We are not quite at that situation. We are not quite at that level between Sister Bay and Liberty Grove, but the vast majority of the firefighters in this fire department are Sister Bay residents, excuse me.
I think that's different. I think the majority of the firefighters in our joint thing are Liberty Grove residents.
No,
They could
they're
report.
Sister Bay.
Sister Bay.
Yeah, they are, yeah. But to specifically answer your question about what's being done, the volunteer firefighters are enrolled in a program called LOSA, Length of Service Award, and it's sort of like a miniature retirement program. We offer what we can to them, to encourage them. Working against us, we have, and I hate to say working against us, but it kind of does for the volunteer firefighters, are the National Fire Protection rules and regulations. In order to be a firefighter one, which is the lowest qualified person who can fight a fire as a volunteer firefighter, they have to go through training through NWTC. Often that training is not offered except in Green Bay or sometimes Shawano. So it's a huge expenditure of time and effort for them to even be a volunteer firefighter anymore. And some guys just don't have time, they're busy, supporting their families. It's as everything, always more complicated when you scratch the surface.
And just a few words on the Joint Fire District and what it's seeking to do. It is a way of actually cutting costs. And the way it's going to ultimately cut costs is to increase efficiency. Not only will it actually have a more guaranteed, not a guaranteed, but a more guaranteed response to a medical emergency or to a fire. And the way that would happen is that there would be, for example, the entire district would be involved. The towns I mentioned from all the way from north through Egg Harbor. And there would be shifts, let's say, 8-hour shifts, 3 of them per day, 7 days a week. And there would be an assistant captain, if you will, who would be responsible for that shift with a particular list of volunteers that he or she could call upon. Right now, when there's a fire and the volunteers come or don't come, depending on their schedules, you could have a lot more response than you might need. You might have 30 people respond for something that would require 10 people. that's a waste of money. But how do you stop that from happening and not make a house burn down? On the other hand, though, when you have 30 people come, because there's no cross-training among the volunteer departments, those volunteers, let's say 30 show up, their effectiveness may be only 20 people, because 10 of them have not been sharing the equipment that different towns might have that they're bringing to a fire, or something like that. So not only will you have a more targeted response when you have these shifts and have the requisite number come to a fire, on the one hand, but you'll have everybody working hand in hand, so when 10 people show up, 10 people will be effective rather than just be idle, a bunch of them being idle because they want to help but they can't do it. Those are some of the things that all the towns have been exploring to increase the service, to guarantee more of a better guarantee of response, as well as to make it more efficient that way.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, John?
If you had a consolidated fire district,
Yes.
what would that do to the urgency of this fire truck purchase? Would that make it a little less critical?
It makes it actually a little bit more critical. The agreement, should that go into effect, would say that anything that a municipality brings into the district goes back and belongs to the belongs to the municipality that you brought into it. And so if we did not purchase this, we would have to then pitch in, as everybody would be, for the new tanker, because it's inevitable that we're gonna get one. But it would not belong to us. We would not be able to depreciate it, and we would not be able to take it back if the district did not work out, for example.
Well, and the district will not accept vehicles or equipment that doesn't meet the current standards. The municipalities are going to retain ownership of their own stations. And my understanding is that the trucks that are initially put into the fire district, when their tenure is up, it comes back to the municipality to dispose of as they want.
Any value goes back to the town that contributed it.
Okay,
So just one more question, sir. Is there any way that the people that teach firefighting can be encouraged to come to Liberty Grove and do the training with our equipment?
we will provide you with the telephone number.
We have tried, yeah.
Yeah.
I
They
mean,
don't, if you'd like to learn Windows 95, we probably could get them. They have refused to come,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
even when we offer to pay them and reimburse them?
We're paying them anyway.
Yeah, we pay over $1 million to NWTC and
Every year.
every year. And this is, boy, you talk about a bone of contention, there it is. For what we pay, we can't even get our service and safety personnel properly trained without them having to drive for a minimum of 2 hours. That's sad.
You kind of hit a sore point.
Sorry.
Like I say, I'm
But that's a good-
trying to see what the bounds are.
Because I have one more idea for you, and I think it's that misnomer volunteer. Call it freelance work, because it's decent, short-term work with decent pay per hour. You keep calling it volunteer, maybe a lot of people think it doesn't pay anything. And I think if you called it
No.
part-time work or something.
Volunteer
you know.
distinguishes it from a municipal department. It-
I mean, there's employees and then there's freelancers.
Well, everybody knows what the volunteers get paid.
Yeah.
They get paid when they work. and,
I know, they do. I
most
say, why is it called that?
Most departments in the country are volunteer, but
Right.
that's a generic name for something that's not a municipally owned, municipally run department.
I understand what it is, but maybe there's some people who really don't know that they get some money.
Oh, sure.
Okay, I think we probably need to move on. Utilities, I think we need to look at lights, heat, right down the line. Janet cringed when I suggested we turn the office down to 55.
The work factor.
I won't tell you what she said, but she cringed, so. But that's an area I think we have to take a look at.
I'll work in my code.
It's gonna work. Committee per diems. I believe it was, 3 years ago that the motion was made at the annual town meeting to pay committee members.
It's one of those recent things. It used to be just the board and the plan commission. And I'm not saying it was a bad idea, but it did certainly increase our bottom line.
And that kind of leads into the next one, the frequency of meetings.
I'd like to
Go
talk
ahead.
about paying. I think a lot of us rather get a little bit old to go to committee meetings. We want to get young people involved. And I was the one that promoted and proposed that $35 a meeting to young people. So we would get them here, we would get them involved, and we have some that have done this. It's a long-range concept, but I think it's very important to support. I think continue to do it.
Well, so far, all we've gained is Mike.
He's a young kid.
He is a young kid, you know, he's very good and very interested.
That's one of the problems we have. We're not retaining young families, we're not attracting young families. And that was one of the primary goals of economic development, was to put in place a series of programs that, and the IT committee as well, put in a series of programs, hopefully, to retain and to encourage young people. Okay, per diems in the frequency of meetings, I'm going to suggest that, given what we're looking at, that committees like economic development, IT, go to quarterly meetings. Parks and properties would be another one. And you go to quarterly meetings, and unless you have a situation that needs an immediate look. That's something.
I don't want to pat plan commission on the back, but we, for quite a while now, if we don't have a variance or a conditional use, we don't meet.
And this leads into another item on the agenda, and that's the consent agenda. I think that the board may look at going to one meeting a month, not necessarily every month, but there are probably months, and we can go back and look, where the menu agenda is light, go to one meeting a month. Okay. All right, I think we've kind of beaten that one to, let's go on. Number 9, consider purchase of mini excavator as listed in the budget. Jay, I have you down for a comment on this?
Sure. I basically wanted to call and answer any questions if anybody knows why we use this machine. We dig in 6 cemeteries. We're currently using a machine that's about half the size. It's hard to reach some of the spots. It's getting kind of wore out. We bought it used. If we had a little bigger one, we use it for digging ditch culverts, cleaning ditches in the spring when we get the runoffs and clearing out the culverts. We can also use it for storm cleanup. The little one we have now, we can't load vehicles with. And we got a crew of 4 people. We use a Bobcat, and this other one would be used, we split up into 2 groups to get the debris cleared off the road a little sooner. Also, the one we looked at has a closed cab. Right now, the one's just open to the elements, so we're out in the rain, and unfortunately, funerals and stuff aren't on sunny days. And it's just a little nicer to have a closed cab on that. Is there any other questions I can answer?
Frank J., what's the cost of the new one list? Do we have a trade-in or not?
I'll have the number.
Yeah, it's 37.5
Is there a trade-in? No.
You should have the sheet.
with the trade-in.
Okay.
It shows it on the proposal there.
The closed cab too keeps dust.
number?
That's the net number, correct.
The enclosed cab also keeps dust away from the operator, which is pretty important, especially when things get dry, it gets dry in the summer. It also it reaches 18 feet out where our one out is 12. And with the cemeteries getting kind of congested, sometimes it's hard reaching over the stones. This one's got a little longer reach.
Do you have any idea, either you or Bud have any idea of projected length of use of this vehicle, how many years?
Well, what we have now is 3,000 hours on it,
Okay.
and we bought it with 2,600. It needs tracks, and we broke a couple rams off, and now it's just getting kind of wore out. But 3,000 hours would take us over 10 years to put that on.
And it's also part of the 5-year equipment replacement program. I think next year, I don't have the program in front of me, but we have the one patrol truck with the equipment on it. Budgeted or estimated to be $150,000 next year, so it would be nice not to push it off another year.
We could also load a full dump truck with this machine, because it's the ability to reach higher.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Susan, I think you were, yes.
Yeah, my only question, Jay, was how much longer the current one you have to work?
Well, I would assume you could probably get 5, maybe 10 years with maintenance, replacing. How I said it, Bud, right? I don't know, I mean, I'm not familiar with the standard equipment.
I would say in that 5 maybe to keep it workable.
But here again, we have a limited crew of 4 to do everything for this town. And if they can be more efficient at it, we're probably gonna have less overtime. Number one thing. Number 2, we'll keep up with what has to be done.
Okay. Board? Go ahead.
Well, and Carl had his hand up.
Are you telling me that the 37.5 cost can be ameliorated over 10 years? So it's basically $3,700 a year after the trade-in?
Well, I think we're estimating that it would, yeah, basically, that's what we're saying.
I mean, that sounds pretty reasonable in the grand scheme of things. I don't see a problem with that.
But why is the whole amount in this budget then? Or it's gonna be less?
It's actually in this year's budget, am I correct?
Next year's budget,
Or next year's budget.
2014 budget.
Right, but the whole amount's in there,
Right.
Yes.
So you gotta pay for it.
the whole amount.
Yeah, you do have to pay for it up front. Yeah.
What do you see? What's the problem?
I'm talking about
Okay, so my understanding of this is $37.5, but this offer is good till what date? Or maybe there's not a date on it.
There isn't.
There is not a date on it.
It's a current quote, they quoted it, but there's a date on there, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was trying to look for it, I'm not running across it.
I see the merit here, but I am really reluctant to make a purchase of this size so soon on the heels of the mandate that we got a couple of nights ago. If we're going to be looking and going through this budget again, I don't think we should make any new purchases other than paying the bills until we have a chance to sit down and look it over well.
Thank you.
Well, we've got at least 2, if not 3 meetings coming up before the end of the year in the joint finance budget.
And I would like to take it up.
That there.
I would like to do that. I just don't want to see any new high-ticket purchases until we have a chance to look at the whole picture.
What's the board thought on that?
think about it. I mean, I see the merit of this, the efficiencies and so forth. Maybe we just need to, like Nate just said, just think about it for the next week or so. And then see where it fits into the bigger scheme of things.
I think we have to think about all of these things in light of what happened.
Yeah.
And I think the frightening thing is with the budget cap going down in 2015, maybe now is the time to get it done. There are a lot of factors here, pro and con, that to be considered.
Well,
Does, just so you're aware of it, that as Jay said, the cemetery, keep in mind the cemetery is getting smaller and smaller.
Right.
And it used to be, when the guys would dig, they could move some stones and get in there with the vehicle and then back the truck up pretty much alongside it. But now, what they're almost forced to do is to bring the truck in behind the excavator, and then so they can swing the unit all the way around to load the truck. And with this unit now, it's kind of small to do that. And I've seen the damage that they've done with the backhoe, putting the pods down and digging into the ground. With this one, you're not damaging the ground, and you're saving, you're only getting in there with one track on the excavator going in, and the truck is following it, so you can swing totally around. With the backhoe, you can't do that. So and the one we have now isn't big enough to dig all the graves that we're digging. Some of them get pretty nasty, and so we need the bigger unit. The new unit would handle that, so that's something else to consider. Plus, with the cab, when we looked at other equipment and looked at cab versus an open air unit, OSHA recommends a cab with heat and air conditioning, because what happens is if you get a hot day and somebody is sweating in that unit, they'll hop off that unit and run for someplace in another truck with air conditioning. Or if they're out there in the cold, and I've seen the guys out there digging the grave for an hour that are sitting in that freezing their butt off on it for an hour or more, they'll hop off that thing and be more prone to getting hurt because they want to hurry up and get someplace where it's warm. So they do recommend, it's an OSHA recommendation that you do have a cab vehicle with heat and air conditioning for operator comfort, so that's something else to consider. And the reason we're doing it now instead of waiting until after the first of the year is we get it before the winter got nasty, so we could be using it in the more extreme conditions, if you will.
Is there any way you can raise the amount of cost to do that service to help pay for something like this?
I think that's going to have to be a discussion. I believe from what Janet said, what we charge to dig a grave is considerably less than most of the surrounding municipalities. Yes.
That was exactly what I was going to say. There are a number of services that the town provides that have a fee structure. Have we looked at the fee structure in terms of whether the service is really being refunded at the cost that it is to the town? Maybe that's another source of income. The rental on the little ladies clubhouse over there and various other things like that.
Parsons Properties are coming up with a recommendation for the town that is exactly addressing that, increasing some of the fees, especially for non-town residents as well, and making a distinction between profit and non-profit so as to be fair. But to certainly recognize the fact, as you point out, that a lot of the services have not been
Not adequate.
exactly.
Yeah, I think the launch fee is, Ellison Bay is one of them, although the dock fee is like, without improvements there, it's kind of.
I think you're limited by launch fees by the DNR.
Improvements on our marina since 2008. Every year the money, like, on a lot of the stuff,
is put someplace else to cover costs that are not in the budget. And, you know, I'd love to have the 300,000 that Bob talks about, but to be very honest with you, if we're talking about whether or not a service benefits 1,700 people, then we'll close the marina. It only benefits 8 or 10 people,
Well,
but it also benefits one of our industries, which is the fishing industry.
and one of the things that, has kind of gone through my mind, we're kind of getting a little bit off of this, but, well, let's go back to keep on this, otherwise, we'll be here until the cows come home. So. I guess my thought on this is, it's gonna, according to this, the delivery ends up in the first quarter of 2014. We obviously are going to have more discussions, maybe at this point in time, just to, I see the merit of this. I think the return on that investment, if you stretch that out over the course of the life of this vehicle, it's probably a pretty good deal.
I would say we get 20 years out of this one.
So, if we wait a week or two, I don't think it's gonna impact the purchase of the vehicle, I guess that's what I'm saying. Until we get, until we actually get that board finance digging into things. So, I guess I would, if the board feels that's the appropriate thing to do, I guess I'd suggest that.
As long as it doesn't get put off entirely.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, it will not. Okay.
So do you need a motion to table or a motion to send it to the finance
Why don't
committee?
yeah, make a motion to send it to the board finance, the upcoming board finance committee meeting.
Okay, I move that this particular line item be sent to the upcoming finance committee meeting.
Board finance.
It's gonna be joint.
Joint board finance.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Special town meeting to reconsider action on total highway expenditures. We had initially said, what, the second?
Initially, yeah.
Initially, and that does not work, because it does not give the 15 days required posting time, because the action actually has to occur tonight. So calendar-wise, we would be looking at the 10th, am I correct?
I believe so. Yes.
And if we make a decision to lower the per road cost below the 5,000, it will not be necessary to have this meeting. I would suggest, though, since we haven't made that decision, that we schedule the meeting, and it either takes place or it doesn't, depending on what we come up with. So I would make a motion to call a special town meeting to reconsider action on total highway expenditures. Is there a second?
Second.
There were 2 seconds.
December 10th.
December 10th. Now, that does not mean that necessarily the 852,000 goes back. I think that's something we have to enter into in our discussion as well.
Excuse me,
Yes.
are you, I mean, that's what we voted on the other day, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so that, you can't bring back up for a vote unless you, I mean, if you do the 5,000 for road, then you're fine, you don't need
Right.
any permission.
Right.
So, but are you saying you could bring that back up for another vote?
Yes.
You mean,
If,
the vote is voted down?
if we decide to spend more than 5,000 per mile, it requires another vote.
So you're saying you're just gonna make us vote again on the thing that we voted on already?
Yes, that's a possibility.
Until what? Until you
Well,
So you
that's what we're gonna have to, we have to have that discussion as to whether we're gonna go below the 5,000.
Oh, I thought the closed meeting was to discuss whether or not that vote was valid. I thought your closed meeting was about that. And if it is valid, then how can you just bring it back up again? We just voted on it.
No, we can come back with another figure.
Okay, somewhere. you
Somewhere
said- and if you
between,
come
say,
up-
the 500,000 and the 852, I mean.
And then we have to vote all over again.
Yep.
And this time, would there be a notice that would say
Oh,
this is
yeah.
what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a suspicion we're probably gonna head for the below 5,000.
But when you say below 5,000, why below? Why not just the number?
Well, we don't need a meeting then.
I mean, I'm saying 5,000. When you say 5,000, I mean, I'm saying 5,000 because you're allowed up to 5,000.
Per mile.
Per
Yeah,
mile.
yeah, per mile. Yeah, I know.
Okay. Carl,
I'm really confused here, Mr. Chairman.
don't feel bad, the rest of us are.
Are you saying that we're calling for a meeting on, what was it, the 10th?
The 10th,
But that you may not have the meeting on the 10th, and you come up with another number that's below the 5,000 per mile for the.
yeah, state statute,
Exactly. Request.
So you're putting in the notice, but you may not actually call.
That
a
is
meeting
correct.
for that day.
that is correct. If we, as a board, finance committee, make the decision that, okay, the 5,000 per mile doesn't work, we actually need more than that, then we'd have to have this meeting.
You have to have the meeting just to exceed the cap, but if you
Yes.
don't exceed the cap, that's fine.
But not the cap, the required.
5,000 miles,
Yes.
$5,000 per mile.
Yes. And the only reason we're doing this is because we're gonna be running out of time here pretty soon. Well, technically not,
No.
we're not.
But there will also need to be a motion to reconsider the action of the town meeting.
Right.
And that motion will need to be passed by the electors at that meeting also,
Correct.
before any discussion takes place.
I'm sorry, could you explain that?
Okay, the action was taken by the special town meeting to not exceed the cap of 5,000 per mile.
Right.
In order to bring that up again, the town electors must pass a motion to reconsider the previous action. Once that passes, if it passes, then it's as if nothing happened at the meeting, and then a new discussion takes place. If it does not pass, the motion of the previous special town meeting is effective, stands.
But you can bring it up again in another month, then, you're saying. You can keep bringing it up as many times as you want until the vote goes the right way. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I suppose you could, but why would you?
Well, you're just going to do it right now. We just did this vote, and you're going to redo it.
It was pretty close.
So are you telling me that?
So if it was the other way, you're saying we could have redone it too? I doubt it.
It's gonna be up to the electors whether it gets
Yeah, we
decided. It's gonna be up to whether it gets reconsidered. That has to take place first.
I guess the question is how soon before the 10th would you know if you're going to consider a new amount? Or would people find out?
Well,
on the 10th?
we're gonna, one of the things we need to do, is, number 13, is to set future meetings. And obviously, I think next week is probably out, considering, it's Thanksgiving. So I think we're gonna start digging into this thing the first week of December. And I would think we'd know that week. My suggestion is we move that to number 1 on the agenda.
Is there a time limit for notification here?
Yes.
15 days.
So if you don't wait until December to do this, aren't you running?
No, if we set the meeting tonight, we get the 15-day notice out there.
What's the requirement for when you develop an agenda so we know what's gonna be discussed?
Well, you mean like the,
When do you announce the items that are gonna be voted on by the town electors?
well, the minute we make that decision as to whether it's gonna go below the 5,000 or above it, we'll make the notification.
The agenda is basically going to read call to order, and then motion to reconsider action action of previous special town meeting and list that action a little bit. And then it'll say, if the motion passes, then the agenda will be to consider total highway expenditures for 2014 in excess of 5,000 per mile.
But if you stay, okay, so if you stay below 5,000 per mile, then you don't have to have the
Correct.
motion to reconsider.
Correct.
Is that the way of reading this?
Correct. And there is, obviously is the option now, the original proposal, excuse me, was for 852,000. That does not necessarily have to be the figure. So if, say, a motion was made for 600,000 and it passed, it could be that. So we're not tied, if the board decides to come back and put that before the electors again, the electors can change that figure, am I correct? I mean, they could make a motion
Yes.
to say that figure be 700,000 instead of 852.
And I think as a point of clarification though, there has been no discussion in closed session or otherwise to nullify the vote of the county
No.
on this issue. Because that's already been suggested, and it's not the case.
Did I miss that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I think Susie suggested that the closed meeting was a way.
Oh, no.
I thought that's what you were deciding.
No,
whether or
no,
not
no.
to Go ahead and do this over again.
No, the closed meeting was on,
As it states on.
a situation that we made.
It's in the paper
All right,
today.
let me read it to you, because I don't want to get
Advocates are.
Consider it an investigation of charges against specific persons which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person involved. It was on determining the elector status at a special town meeting. That's it.
And you're not gonna do anything about it once you determine it?
Just we can't talk about it.
We-
No, of course not.
We can't talk about it at this point in time. I
We
will
weren't
tell,
talking yesterday.
John, I will tell you this, it's being referred to legal counsel.
If you call this new town meeting, is it possible to suggest strongly that you have the voting rolls and check the people who sign in? When we had the Gills Rock vote, we determined whether a person who was coming to the meeting was in fact an eligible town voter, I think. That's what took all the line out here and the length of time that it took.
That would be.
People came in and signed in, and it was basically taking people at their word that they were in fact eligible voters.
Well, you don't have to be an eligible registered voter to be an elector.
Yeah, you know, that's
All
what,
you have
that's
to do
what
is
changed
live
this
in a
time.
township for
That's what they
28 days
changed.
prior to
They
the meeting.
changed that.
Consecutive.
Consecutive days at the most. So whether you're a registered voter or not, that wouldn't count in any process.
That is no longer the criteria.
Yeah, this,
The minimum, not the most, the minimum.
No, I said, what the suggestion is to look at the voter rolls would just be a waste of time.
yeah, and actually, the sign-in sheets we had on, when I was at Monday night, basically accomplished what, I guess what you were suggesting. To be a town elector does not mean you have to be a registered voter in the town. If you want to participate in a state election, a county election, and so forth, then you must be a registered voter of the town. Okay?
If the board decides to put another proposal before the electors, would you give us a comparison with the existing monies that are proposed to be spent on the highways and what the new proposal would be by the board? So we could look and see what it is
I think
they've done.
that's a reasonable request. Why not?
Before the day of the vote.
Yeah, before the day of the vote.
And, you know, I would also, strongly urge anyone who can possibly come to these meetings and listen to what's going on. It's really hard, to do minutes on a finance committee meeting because it's all numbers and saying, well, what do you think about this? Well, scratch that. And it's almost impossible to do a narrative on that. But when you're right there, looking at the line items with the people sitting at that meeting and listening to the give and take and the what ifs, it's a whole lot easier to understand, and it would be to our benefit and to yours for those of you who have questions to be there.
When is that meeting?
We haven't said it yet, but write it down. We're gonna be setting the first one.
Would, at that meeting, would you have the existing monies that were on the budget proposed, and then come up with?
That's exactly what we're going to be looking at.
Okay, and we'd have access to that before the meeting, so it wouldn't be, have to burden you with a million questions as we go along.
Okay. All right?
Yeah.
Correspondence. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I jumped in.
we're discussing on the side here.
Yeah.
Is the 10th going to be too soon for this? Because I think the board / finance might have to have 2 meetings to work this out.
That's right.
Okay.
And the first week of December would be kind of pushing it. So moving the town meeting to the 17th, would that be?
That would be fine, but we have that report notice.
Yeah.
I don't have to post it tonight.
That's right.
And then set 2 meetings, we could that first week of December.
Yep.
Either the Monday the 2nd, and I don't know if we want to do it at the same night as the board meeting, but,
We could do it, we could do finance at 6, board finance at 6, would that work on the 4th?
Sure. The only trouble is finance tends to
Yeah.
last a while.
Finances
Yeah.
are usually 3 hours.
Yeah, they're often,
you better do it.
yes, exactly.
But actually, we've got future meetings, well, okay, we can decide it.
If you're gonna go to the 17th, we'll have to rescind that previous motion and make a new motion to call it a town meeting on the 17th. Because right now it's set for the 10th.
I don't think we made it, but
We just decided on a name.
Lowry moved, Barber second, to call a special town meeting to reconsider highway expenditures.
Was there a vote?
There was not a vote.
You're on your second. Motion. Lose it, lack of second here. Okay, so we're looking at the 17th or the 19th? What works?
17.
17th. I'll make a motion that we set the December 17th at 6 work
Yes.
for a special town meeting to reconsider action on the total highway expenditure. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
What time of day?
6 p.m.
This is for the meeting that might be canceled.
6 p.m.
Yes. December 17th.
When was the finance committee?
That's
So
it.
we have that to set yet.
Yeah.
And when is the finance committee?
We have that to set yet.
At the same time?
No.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we voted, right? Everybody's favor.
We did.
Aye.
Yeah.
Opposed?
Now, finance, board finance.
Why don't we take that at future meetings on 13th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought we were going to meet on the 2nd.
No.
Being considered under item 13.
13.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I believe everybody got in their packet the consent agenda items. what a consent agenda is?
I just got my packet tonight.
A consent agenda, just for edification for everybody, is, and it's pretty commonly used, both in the corporate world and also in government. Items can go on to the consent agenda, like, in this case tonight, the checks to be paid.
Okay.
A report from the committee. And basically, you move to approve the consent agenda, it basically eliminates all the, conversation and so forth related to that. Any supervisor can ask the item be taken off for further consideration. It's just a matter to expedite the meeting. And the reason I put this on here was, if we start going to one meeting a month, those meetings can stretch out a long time. And this is a way to possibly, expedite meetings. It's basically if you will, controversial items that put on the consent agenda.
Ephraim did that, now I'm remembering, it's basically regular and ongoing business.
I believe Assistant Day is doing it, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I do
Suzie, I
remember.
think, John, you were first on this one, I think, right? Oh, no, I'm sorry. 11. Mike?
Yeah, I was very, very curious to hear what you were going to say and explain it, because I'm a little bit familiar with consent agenda, and I thought it was very appropriate for nonprofits and organizations, but not for governments necessarily. All of us have differing opinions, but all of us appreciate the opportunity to speak at meetings, and I'm very concerned that the negative part of consent agenda is that there may be items that are put there that are controversial or it could be misused, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because, as I understand it, only the board members have the opportunity, if it's in the consent agenda, to ask for its removal. And it may not be possible for any of us to ask for that change, as I understand this, and I'm concerned we might lose the opportunity to express our opinions or to discuss things that are important to us because they get stuck in that consent agenda. That's what I see as a downside, especially in a public forum like this.
I think we could consider putting the consent agenda following public input. And if somebody asks to have something further discussion, it would be up to the supervisor to say, I would like to place that. I mean, that's an option we've got, obviously. Mike has that's a concern.
And I appreciate you talking about that, because that's what I see as the downside to it, potential misuse.
My question on it is, if it's just like anything else on the agenda where we can say, I'd like to speak on that item, the consent agenda, and then you have a list of the things on the consent agenda, or are they just a big,
It's a list.
It's a list. And are we allowed to have public input on the consent agenda, is the question.
My understanding on that is, well, that depends on where it occurred. If it occurs after public input, yes. If it occurs before, no.
Well, then that's key, because then if there is, like Mike said, anything interesting on there to us, we want to be able to say something about it.
It actually gets, the purpose of it is to get the mundane things taken care of without,
Yeah.
taking up a lot of time.
Do we have the discretion as a board to allow public comments on consent agenda? I mean, I hear the concern and I understand it. How can we make it flexible enough to make the public comfortable with it?
I think we can probably structure it as we would.
Okay, then I don't have a problem with that.
And I think I think what we should do is come back at the December 2nd meeting and make a decision on it. I'm not asking a decision to be made tonight. I think everybody needs to read the information.
Why don't
No,
we,
I don't.
for December, why don't we make up a consent agenda
On
on a regular agenda?
Yeah, that would be a good idea.
See what the difference would be.
Try to play a hand.
And if it works, it looks workable.
What meeting is set for December 2nd?
Yes,
What meeting is set for December 2nd?
the regular board meeting.
No.
All not the second, I'm sorry.
Fourth.
Fourth.
Number four.
Correspondence.
Are
See, if we had a consent agenda, we'd been out of here an hour ago.
Excuse me, are we gonna meet on the second with the finance board committee?
That's coming up on
We
the
haven't gotten that
13th.
far.
Okay, that's coming on 13th.
We have to suffer through the correspondence.
Letter from the village regarding the upcoming meeting, and/or meetings for discussion of the plant ownership on December 9, scheduled for here at 5:30 p.m. Holiday festivities,
But can I explain on that, that this is for Sister Bay to present their side of the ownership issue. And then, a while later, we'll
it's
have.
different now. They've changed directions here in the middle of the street a little bit. They want us and them to present, so take a look at the letter, and we'll have to, Peter and I will have to get together on this.
And I will make this comment right now. Given the current budget that we're looking at, we may not have the legal fees to challenge the ownership issue. And that's another item that we're gonna have to take up at our meeting. You gotta, I mean, all the time and effort that is going into that. Anyway, sorry.
The village of Beacon Snow and Ice Control Policy, like Mike mentioned, sent a letter to Kathy Olson and Chris Burns saying that we will look at their situation. We originally in this month, but we were kind of jammed here, so we put them off till December 18th for those two parcels. A letter from Gary Lisa, asking the board to consider the removal of the cedar trees from the beginning of the ramp towards the lake at the Allison Bay Ramp. Utilities Committee meeting minutes of November 5th. A note that a grant from the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Program has been awarded to support the acquisition of 40 acres of land located in Liberty Grove by the Nature Conservancy. Doesn't say where it is. Timber cutting notice for section 10. Three different portions of section 40s on section 10. This would be the land trust parcel formerly owned by George Reynolds. And we were down there on Three Springs Road the other day, and they've got quite a bunch of pine piled up out by the road there. Okay, that's it.
Okay. Future meetings. Week of December 2nd. I don't think we're gonna be able to do anything.
Okay, just before we get to that,
Sorry.
the fire board meets Monday,
Oh, I'm sorry.
8 o'clock.
Correct.
Yeah.
8 a.m.
Monday, this coming Monday?
25th. No planning commission on the 27th.
Correct.
We'll get back up to the 21st, RPC, Martin Commission of Use of Wood.
No, we don't. The main reason we wanted to go to that was because they're supposed to be hearing input from the towns on the text amendment. And they bumped that back to the 19th, and we didn't feel like there was gonna be any controversy over the Wagon Trail.
Yeah, I'm lettering on this one.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, on the first, on Sunday the 1st, tree lighting in Olson Bay at 5 p.m. And December 1st is the first day to circulate nomination papers for town board. When? December 1st. There's there'll be an ad in the paper on Saturday, the 23rd, detailing the instructions for, and the notice for upcoming elections.
But
Yes.
is the 1st of December a date somebody has to decide if they're not gonna run next election?
No, that is is December 27.
Okay.
5 PM is the deadline for notification of non-candidacy, which is the second Friday before the January filing. The January filing is Tuesday, January 7th of 2014. Monday, the highway committee has been moved back to December 9th at 8 AM. The third, we have Sister Utilities at 7 AM, Parks and Properties at 8 AM. Wednesday is the board at 7. And the 9th, tentatively scheduled treatment plant negotiations, 5:30. And the highway committee, 8 AM. Plan commission on the 11th. I did notify Mr. Zelnio that we would be listening to his variance on that night. The board is the 18th, special town meeting on the 17th. Did we say 17th?
On the 16th, at Sister Bay Utilities at 5:30.
5:30. Okay.
All right.
I'm sorry, excuse me, on the 25th of November, what meeting is that?
The fire board at 8 AM at the South Fire Station.
Ms. Goss, was there a date for your meetings, the finance committee?
We haven't set those yet, right there.
All right. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday?
Let's start early, Monday, 6 PM.
That works.
That works for me. I pretty much have that week open right now.
That's a Monday night Packers game, but who's gonna wanna watch it? I have no idea.
I hope not.
What's the date of that then? What's
The second,
Second.
December 2nd.
yeah.
Board/finance at 6 PM.
6 p.m.
6 PM?
Yes. You wanna go on this Tuesday?
I thought Tuesday opens up.
If needed.
You're talking about
Could be
the
agreed
third?
on the first night.
I think we ought to set it up for the 3rd at 6 PM also.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Yep.
And
What was the last meeting? I just,
The full finance committee.
you're comfortable, we won't have to do anything in between two meetings on?
Yeah, does that give you enough time to shuffle things like do your magic and stuff?
I don't know.
Oh, we go
Thursday. Should we maybe-
That's all right.
It's a short time frame in between the two meetings. If you're
Right,
trying
and
to
sometimes Bud
Oh, I
needs
see
to,
what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah,
investigate or figure something out.
right. Maybe we should make it
Why are we
Thursday.
going Thursday?
Yeah.
Thursday the 5th.
Yeah.
Same time?
Same day.
Yeah.
Yep.
2 and 5 now?
2 and 5.
Second and 5th, yeah, 6 PM.
No. I'm getting calls and contacts from people that think there's gonna be a special town meeting on the 2nd. So I think we have to put on that notice somehow to make sure on the website that there will be no town meeting on the 2nd. So I've had 3 or 4 contacts already on that.
So on the calendar, will that read finance meeting
Board finance, joint meeting.
or finance?
Special town meeting was what, 6 o'clock also?
That's on the second. And if, that would give us, if we need another day besides the 5th, we could set that meeting, the 5th in, we could pick, what do we got, Monday or Tuesday, the 9th or 10th if we needed.
Okay.
For another meeting.
Not the 9th, because there's a utility committee meeting at 5:30.
Well, it's tentative. Go
That
ahead, no, go ahead.
could be, depending on these two
Yeah,
meetings,
that
that
could
could
be
be
moved.
torpedoed, eliminated.
set the 10th, if needed.
6 o'clock again?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we've got the 3rd.
No.
Second. We've got Monday the 2nd, Thursday the 5th, and Tuesday the 10th.
What's on Tuesday the tenth?
A third meeting if we need it for board and finance.
We don't know who's on first, though.
Sorry. Will the finance committee have any documents that would be available to us coming here so we could have a chance to look at them and be somewhat intelligent at that meeting?
It will be the budget that you had, that was handed out. That's what we're gonna discuss. We're gonna go through that maybe line by line.
All right.
Unless there's a no-brainer. All right. It's taken us about 2+ hours to get the spending money. All right.
We've already spent it.
Okay, are there any questions on the bill? If not, I will move payment of the bills as presented.
I'll second.
Okay,
Ladies first.
Fourth. Being very polite here. Any other discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. I will be adjourned.